Hello, my fellow seekers. Welcome to Into the Work, therapy for empaths, seekers, and the intuitively driven, where you have front row seats to therapy sessions and expert interviews that will help you define the important work that you're here to do. So I guess you actually have something better than front row seats. You practically have a seat on my couch. That's right, you will have unrestricted access to actual sessions with real people, exploring real life issues. You will continue to be inspired by powerful conversations with experts and healers that might just share exactly what it is that you need to hear to get unstuck. I am Michelle Pauverman. I am a recovering people pleaser and former anxiety-driven empath, turned now mostly grounded psychotherapist and intuitive coach. I have been helping people for almost 20 years manage their limiting beliefs and anxiety to finally stop the self-sabotage and step into their gifts. I created this podcast, Into the Work, to give you a place to learn more about yourself and give you actionable strategies to finally move those roadblocks holding you back so you can go for what you want. Above all else, my hope is that this podcast is a catalyst for your awakening. If you're listening, you've already taken a step towards getting off of autopilot, and our next steps together will be taken episode by episode, waking you up to the possibilities, the new ways of thinking and being, so that you can stretch into that next level of your story. The spark has already been lit, and my friend, this is a journey from spark to brilliance. So together, let's light a fire. Hey there, welcome back to the show. I'm quickly just going to let you know that the link is in the show notes below in case you still would like an opportunity to learn more about the Modern Empath's Boundary Mastery course that I'm going to be doing. The door is open for it in March, but I am doing an early bird special for people to sign up now, and it's the lowest price it's ever going to be. And it is a 12-week coaching program, course, energy healings. It's going to be packed with so much to help you with a beautiful transformation. If you are interested, check out the link below. Don't hesitate to come on in. This is where my email list is, where you will find out about my podcast episodes as well, or anything else going on. And you will be welcomed this week and this week only to check out the course and see if it's a fit for you. So moving on, we are talking about some of these sneaky ways you are likely trying to be less to make others be more. Okay, so you have a history of people pleasing, right? Most of us, many of us who are sensitive, we do. We have a history of dealing with our own people pleasing issues, right? And so you probably have even come a long way. You might even say you're almost over it. You might even be on that end of the spectrum where you feel like you've been working on it for a long time and you are finally feeling like, I am almost over this thing. But there really are kind of sneaky ways that this stuff still comes back up, which is why it is safe to say that on some level, deconstructing this old paradigm in your life that you're in right now around people pleasing and boundary setting as well, that in order to really nurture your personal power and heal the people pleasing can truly be life's work. This is not to discourage you, obviously, but actually just to honor this really beautiful process that happens and grows deeper and better every time when you focus on healing it again. Because each time it's like peeling back a layer, right? So in fact, many of you can look to a parent who has demonstrated people-pleasing tendencies, and we could argue for you that this very well could be ancestral, right? It could be ancestral trauma that's been passed down. However, for those of you who grew up where love and emotional safety were conditional to doing exactly what other people wanted, people-pleasing is also a long-time protective factor. So if you're an empath, people-pleasing was likely a tool against what I call the double whammy. So first, the learned coping strategy maybe the ancestral pass down or just the programming you got to be safe was one way that you received the people pleasing and found it to be a useful tool, brilliant at the time as it was. And then along with that, you also found it as another way to control the environment, meaning if you experience the emotions of other people's disappointment, frustration, sadness, and people pleasing also controlled whether or not you were going to feel overwhelmed by everybody else's stuff, it was another tool for that. So as an empath, specifically, if that's what you feel that very clearly you are, you likely developed it as a way to stay safe in relationships, but also to manage the overwhelm, right? Feeling other people's stuff. But here you are. And at the very least, this episode can help you take inventory on what stuff is still coming up for you. What stuff is coming up for you? What things that you're like, oh no, I healed that. But if we really pay attention to it today, you might start noticing over the next week, like, there's this thing that's happening and I'm kind of doing that. So I want you just to listen in, and we're going to just name a few things to make it more clear on what I'm talking about when I say that you are making yourself less in order to make other people more. We didn't realize this when we started. Okay, we didn't realize that people pleasing was going to ask us to shrink ourselves rather than make necessary changes in their relationships. But when you started people pleasing, you didn't know how to make changes in relationships. You didn't have the power maybe to make changes in relationships. The emotional intelligence, the language, you're probably young. And why this matters, right? Because, talking about this today, why this matters, the cost of constantly making yourself smaller just really turns into, as you heard me say a million times, really erosive things like resentment and burnout and guilt and indecision. And just, most importantly, when you chronically make other people matter more than you, it leads to powerlessness and a disconnection from your authentic self. Like you're not even sure who that is, right? So both of which you're going to need more of in order to create whatever you're here to create. You need to feel powerful. You need to know who you are, understand what you want, understand your authentic desires and opinions and wants and needs. Those are very important. So the first thing people think of when I say you're making yourself less to make others more is dimming your light to make others feel more important. It's kind of the first thing people go to. You're not feeling comfortable shining your light, right? Maybe you downplay your accomplishments or make less of your talents or dim your joy so others don't have to feel insecure. And you think this is more comfortable for them if you do these things. And it's a false belief that being less makes relationships safer. Okay? It doesn't actually make them safe because no relationship is truly safe when it's not possible for you to show up authentically. There's no real connection when you can't be authentic. So that always is going to make it feel shaky. This is based on the fear of making others jealous and uncomfortable or distancing yourself, right? That if you outshine somebody, they're going to not feel good enough. They're going to feel jealous. When I was starting out, I have to admit that I had kind of a magical beginning to my business. When I say starting out, I mean when I was creating my own practice, when I was busting out on my own. And I've probably mentioned the calendar trick that made it all feel pretty magical when I sat down. Somebody gave me the tip to sit down. I had no clients. I had just rented the space, and I just pulled out a calendar and I put a couple of people's names in different slots. And I just said, okay, these are the people that are coming in. And I felt like, I was setting the intention. I was kind of doing the manifesting stuff. And I was also just making myself feel how that feels to have a calendar with names in it. And sure enough, not the first person, but the second person who came into my practice, their name was Kathy. And that was the first name that I put down on my calendar. And the next person who came into my practice was Catherine. And then the next person who came into my practice was like Catherine with a K and a Y, and then next person with a C, and Kathy with a C, Kathy with a C. I had about 5 of them in my practice from the beginning. It was really kind of crazy. And so I never get sick of telling that story because it really was just like, wow, you can't get hit over the head any harder. So it really gave me the nudge that this is magical. I'm right on track. I'm doing all the right things. However, starting a business for everybody, myself included, there are so many factors that go into it. Okay. There's so many, and it takes time. In fact, I tell everybody it takes about 3 years to have a full practice. It takes time. And so I was really excited that I was having some good fortune in the beginning. And it was just like magical things like that were brewing. And I felt like things were happening left and right, that it was just so amazing and giving me so much hope and feeling really good about my decision to start my own practice. But I didn't want to celebrate it. I felt uncomfortable talking to people about it because I felt like I would be bragging, or they would feel bad about themselves because they're in a different place. And I had some other friends that were all kind of breaking out into the world in their own ways, and or some had been working for a little bit and just weren't feeling the same vibe, right? And so even those people who weren't on the entrepreneurial path, it just felt wrong. I'd say, someone would say, "Hey, Michelle, how's your new business?" People always ask me. And I said, "Oh, going great. But it takes a long time to build a business." And I'd always put some disclaimer. Like, it was so strange. I would put some disclaimer because I felt like if I at least said it's hard, or it could possibly fail, or it could take a long time, or something bad could happen, that somehow that made me more relatable. And if I said to them instead, "It's magical. It's amazing. I have clients coming in left and right. I'm doing all these really cool things. I feel the whole world's expanding. It's amazing." At the time, that didn't feel good. It felt really threatening to my relationships. And that, by the way, is not the people in my relation that I was in a relationship with. That was me. That was all me. Okay. So just to be clear. But I was really invested, I think, in being relatable. And we'll get back to that. But I've known people who seem uncomfortable with others shining light on their value and strengths as well. So they have the habit when somebody says, "Oh my gosh, like, wow, you're really such an incredible mother," right? We'll say that. "You're really such an incredible mother. Like, you literally have mother skills. It's amazing. Like, you should teach this to other people. It's so good." And that person needs to also have a disclaimer, right? So that person who has a difficult time having the light shown on their strengths and what they're good at and their genius zone, then they're very uncomfortable. And so they have to say something like, "Oh, thank you, but it's my husband that's really the glue of the family." Or they make some disclaimer. "Yeah, we're all getting by. Let me tell you about what I did last week. That was really a messy, horrible thing." And it's just, again, I think we want to be relatable. It's fear of, being so different than others that they won't stick around. Or just someone in business, right? Wow. Maybe someone comes up to you and you have your own business and someone says, "Wow, you have such a gift for what you are doing. It's incredible." And then that person turns to you and say, "Hey, trust me, I have a long way to go before blank happens." They need a disclaimer. They can't hold that high vibrational level of light. And again, this disclaimer feels safer than to own the gift in the relationship. I want to suggest you take a moment here. And I want you to watch, even this week, I want you to watch how you own a compliment, how free you are to shine and celebrate your wins without dampening it all because you perceive it will make others uncomfortable. It always was important to me to be relatable. And I want to get back to this real quick. It was always important to me to be relatable. So being relatable was a compliment I'd get from time to time. I still get it a lot. "You're so relatable." And for a long time, I defined that as being like someone else. Like maybe I'm really good at reading them and matching them and giving them who they want or need. And that's actually very true. And that was a skill set of mine. It still is. And it's helpful. It's not meant to be manipulative in any way. It's just, and I think you understand it if you're listening to this podcast, right? That we have an ability to understand deeply. We can read between the lines. We can feel the energy underneath the words, and we can sense and feel what other people need. And so that always felt like a compliment. But now I know that it's actually, the secret isn't being like somebody. Okay. It's not matching them. It's not giving them what they need. That in fact, I know the secret of being relatable. The secret is being authentic. I mean, even if I'm Alaska and you're Florida, my authenticity speaks to your soul and it gives you permission to do the same thing. So now I redefine that as relatable, okay? Which meaning I now redefine relatable as authentic and real. So others who yearn to be the same can come out to play. But when you are authentic and real and you just be authentically you as much as you can and you let it fly and you keep a little filter on, because we all need a little filter. I certainly need a little filter, but I think honestly, it's just in my authenticity and your authenticity where you speak to someone's soul. There's a spark like, hey, I like that. I want that. I want more of that in my life, right? So you help others who yearn to be the same, authentic and real, so they can come out and play. So really, I just want you to take a look at what it might mean for you to be relatable and how you're doing in your authenticity in that way. But there are other ways that are less obvious, but also familiar to you, I'm sure, that being less so others can be more is showing up. And so I'm going to name a few and we can just kind of tag them just a bit. And I want you just to listen to this and take inventory. That's something I used to do. Is that something that I'm kind of still doing? Or is that something that's completely moved on in my life? Okay. So first is being less sensitive to hurtful comments or hurtful people. So, but they're more comfortable. So you're being less sensitive. So they're more comfortable and you get to avoid a conflict, right? Because none of us like conflict. But here's the deal. Instead of looking at, I need to change the relationship because this person says hurtful things to me, instead of looking outward at the problem, right? You go inward with it and you think, I need to come up with a solution inside me instead of fixing the relationship. So people pleasers dismiss or downplay their own hurt in an effort to maintain the peace. Instead of being clear and direct that that was a hurtful comment, I'm going to try to be less sensitive. And actually, at some point, you probably thought, if I am less sensitive, I'm actually more resilient. And so people have this idea that they're working on being more resilient in the situation. But it's actually not resiliency. It's actually self-abandonment, okay? And you have this fear of being seen as too much or too emotional or too this or that. And so you try to be less so that others can be more comfortable. So check that if that's something that you used to do, are currently doing, or has moved out of your life. Next one is you're really working on having less needs so that others are more comfortable feeling enough. So instead of recognizing and communicating unmet needs in your relationships, many people pleasers convince themselves that they probably need too much, right? They're going to be too much again. It kind of, this is becoming a theme. And they start ignoring their own needs. And unfortunately, this leads to relationships where their needs are not considered. So if you have a history of being in relationships where people aren't really considering your needs, and now at this point in your life, it's starting to piss you off, you know, like you're recognizing like, geez, like nobody's thinking of me, what my needs are. And that's because the manual that you gave them when you met, you know, didn't include you having needs, right? Or didn't include the needs that you desperately want to vocalize. And so the fear behind that is the fear of being a burden or too demanding. And again, we can shift this out of our life when the pendulum swings from saying nothing to saying it every day, all week long, right? Where I'm like, I have needs. You're not listening to my needs. Because now, the bucket is full and you're overflowing with this need, and it's not been getting tended to. And so we look at this because it is just another way that's kind of sneaky, and you don't realize that it's really something you were doing at some point to shrink. Are you still doing it is the question. Is this something that's moved out? But if it has moved out, is it something that you've mastered where you're able to articulate your needs in such a way that you feel heard? And so that's really important. Eventually, there has to be a sense of power within you to feel that I have an impact. If I say I have a need, that it is heard and experienced as important, right? There's an impact on the other person that you express it to. The next one is over-accommodating others' needs while ignoring your own. So this is you trying to be less important and mattering less so that others will be more happy with you, right? More appreciative. They'll think you're so easy and you make you so likable. And we disguise this as, I don't care. It's fine. Whatever. What do you need? I'm totally good with that, right? Like that easy, breezy, I'm super accommodating person. And maybe you say yes to things you don't want to. You know the drill, right? Feeling responsible for others' emotions, but disregarding your own. Fear of disappointing others or losing connection tends to be the wave beneath this, right? We desperately hate disappointing other people when we find ourselves being super accommodating. Another way that we kind of are being super accommodating, it can be its own thing too, is I just want you to watch, when do you withhold your opinions, right? So like staying neutral or agreeing with others, even when you probably feel differently deep down inside, if you really spend some time on it. Or maybe you're so disconnected from yourself, you're actually not sure of what your opinions are. And so you just sort of agree because it's easier. Maybe downplaying your knowledge or your expertise to avoid seeming difficult or too opinionated, right? This can come up for a lot of us in the position of helping other people too. We can sort of be the people come to, we hold a lot of wisdom and we help, but then we also feel like, we're always showing up with this knowledge and expertise, and we don't want to be the know-it-all. We're trying so hard not to be the know-it-all, right? If we're really like knowledge seekers, like a lot of us are that are listening, like you love knowing, you love knowledge, you have a thirst for it. You actually have a bank in the back of your energy system, in your consciousness, where you can just like pluck information out that comes from like 7 years ago that is exactly what needs to be said in this moment. However, you might fear being a know-it-all and too opinionated. And the fear behind that is being judged, creating tension, and being perceived as arrogant. And God forbid, we don't want you to be perceived as arrogant. And so we worry about that. And so, there are ways that we make ourselves less by withholding and accommodating it that way. So again, you're seeing, are these things current for me? Are they still coming up? Are they in the past? And what do you want showing up for yourself as we move forward? So you may hear this and be like, oh my God, that is me. It's not something everybody's aware of because we don't always get to watch ourselves. But when I have noticed some people, they actually become less physically in a way when they are, let's say, in a group of people. So they begin to speak softer. They begin to speak less frequently, or they apologize for speaking at all. Especially, and they have there's a lot of angst about being too much, putting too much out there. So lowering your voice when speaking up in a group is a way that you become less. And you're also taking a step back to let others dominate the conversation, right? While you hold back on the sidelines. And so a lot of times the fear behind this is fear of being seen as too assertive or taking attention away from others. Maybe you grew up in a place where this was a thing, maybe with your siblings or with your parents, like there was a cost to taking up too much attention. Maybe it happened in your friend groups. I've literally seen people full of wisdom, full of opinions, literally turn into a quiet little whisper in the group. And you can see it in body language too. You become less in body language, shrinking your body, crossing your arms, hunching your shoulders, making yourself physically smaller in social situations where there's more people, avoiding eye contact. Maybe you step aside to let others in and take up more space, and you kind of shrink a little bit in the background. This is not just about being shy. You can be kind of quieter as an introvert, but this is a lessening, a shrinking that is happening for an emotional reason or a fear-based reason. The fear of being, again, too much, too confident. There are so many people that would kill for more confidence, but there's also a lot of us that are afraid of appearing too confident. So I really want you to watch how you take up space, what that looks like for you. What has your history been around speaking up in groups, taking up space, sharing an opinion? Do you tend to overly apologize for taking up such space? Do you start with an I'm sorry before you speak? I'm sorry, but can I say this thing? Right? Do you tend to feel like you need to apologize for taking up space? You're not even interrupting people, let's say. You're really just about to say something and you're like, sorry, but this is what I'm thinking. So as we move into less self-shrinking, into more healthy relationships, you're looking to really adopt the belief that changing yourself is not the answer. It's not about you becoming less. It's not about you changing yourself. It is either about changing the dynamics in your relationships and changing how you show up in those relationships. So I want you to think about how to start this if you feel like you need to kind of reboot this for yourself. I want you to start recognizing when you're making yourself less. I want you to challenge the fears driving your people pleasing and show up for them. Notice when they're happening. This is an example. I am feeling kind of nervous about speaking up in this group. And just take a moment, take a breath, be in your body, and recognize this is coming up for you. These could be a group of beautiful, lovely people that you really like and adore and you enjoy being with, and you would normally, speak freely, but in this situation, you're being triggered. And I want you just to notice what your triggers are. So this is how we heal them. This is the beginning, is we have to bring them to the surface so we can actually know what they are, so that we can have different responses to them. So I want you to practice self-advocacy and try to decide if there were a boundary to be set. If there was a boundary that I could set in this situation, what would it be? And then the question is, would it be with myself or would it be with someone else? Right? Is the boundary that I need with myself to hold myself accountable, to decide what I want for myself and follow through with that, right? To take steps and practice and putting myself out there and doing things that are important. Those would be boundaries with myself, right? Not going on autopilot, forgetting I ever made those goals and just ignoring it and skipping all the good stuff that you want to do for yourself. I'm asking you to decide, is the boundary you need with yourself, or is there a boundary with another person who seems to struggle with you taking up space, seems to struggle with you wanting to show up more instead of showing up less? Most of the time, it's on us. And most of the time, people are very open and happy to allow you to take up space. In fact, it's like bringing water to a dry well in a relationship. You cannot have an intimate, close relationship, right? Like you cannot be relatable. That's my thing, right? If you are not being authentic, if people don't know what you think, how you feel about things, They don't actually get to know you in the ways that you desperately want to be known. And so I want to encourage you to practice self-advocacy, practice some boundary setting with yourself, boundary setting with others, just by even acknowledging what needs to change is a huge step. And I want you to consider that there may be relationships that actually require you to shrink in order to exist. And I want you to label those relationships so you know which ones they are. And then you're going to allow yourself to let that percolate. And what's going to unfold once you label that is going to be your truth, your authenticity, all the things that maybe you've been stuffing and not acknowledging are going to start to come to the surface. And I'm sorry, that might make you feel uncomfortable, but you need to know if you are engaging in relationships that require you to shrink. Okay, you need to know that is to your core bad for you. And it's so important for you to acknowledge it and then come up with a plan of how you want to act on that. And I do have another episode on that, on how to manage relationships that are changing, and that might be helpful. So I hope this was helpful today. I want you to just kind of let this percolate and see how it can potentially help you shift some things that you weren't really paying attention to, and that's okay. I want you just to take some time and let this percolate and see if there are things showing up in the next week or so that you can say, oh, I'm still doing that thing, right? All right. Have a wonderful week, and I will talk to you next week. Bye for now. Thank you for listening to Into the Work Therapy for Empaths and Seekers. Don't forget to grab your free gift, your Shadow Work Transformation Bundle at michellepoverman.com. I've included everything you need to get started to break through the patterns of self-sabotage and finally start to heal the parts of yourself that are getting in the way of truly reaching your potential. From a powerful meditation designed to help you meet and embrace your shadow self, to the guide that's full of curated prompts and important questions to support you on this journey. This really can be the work for you to unmask the root cause of all the issues you've been experiencing, honestly, and start to feel free to believe in yourself and go for what you want. The link for this free bundle is in the show notes. And if you like this episode, I would be so grateful if you could take a moment and rate, click and follow, and leave a review. Of course, you can always follow me on socials at Michelle Poverman. And keep in mind, as you embark on your journey from spark to brilliance, remember, the universe is always conspiring in favor of your awakening. Everything that's happening is in support of you lighting your own fire within. So until we meet again, may your path be well lit and your heart be guided. Shine bright, seekers, until next time.